welcome to my presentation. The official title is Imagine an Overheated Debate, and so on and so forth. Imagine your debating partner having a positive corona test hours before the presentation. So it will not be a debate in that sense, and we also have to lower our expectations in regard to the performative aspect of the presentation. But I think it will be interesting nonetheless. One sentence on my background, because it's relevant for the topic, is I was trained as a professional graphic designer and went to art school and learned all this traditional drawing and worked as an illustrator and went through anatomy classes and live drawing classes. And when these new models came out for image generation, it was quite a shock for me because like a year ago I hadn't expected this to be possible. And what I will do now in the next half hour is to show you some aspects of this heated debate around these image generators, as it has been going on mostly on Twitter, but also on various other channels since OpenAI released DALL-E in April last year. So very sorry that Sebastian Schmieg, who contributed a lot to this, can't be here today. We see how this goes. So first of all, an impression of how random the results are if you enter a certain sentence, like for example the title for the talk, into the various different models. So you can see the great variation in results, and also the tendency on the left, you see Mid-Journey, for example, one of the newer versions where it very much moves towards kitsch, and where you basically can just enter one word and you get like an amazingly beautiful but very cliche image. And depending on the model and also the version of the model, the results are very different. So it's a very unpredictable technique. And this is on the left, probably the most famous DALL-E image, one how the service was advertised in April. And back then I was quite impressed by this specific image. Now, having looked at so many of these, it looks rather old school already and a bit outdated. And yeah, and with the other reaction to it, you see what happens if the models become actually open, and people are also doing more provocative images than OpenAI originally imagined that tool to be used. And only 3 days after the release, people were also already writing, design has gone from painting to prompting. So there's like a huge shift going on. And also I forgot to mention that I'm teaching design. So for me, it's like also a big question now, what is the future of design? What skills do we actually have to teach future designers? And will it be prompting? And also, what are the necessary skills? And here's like another aspect of this whole thing, where the big promise by OpenAI basically is that you don't need any other specific skill anymore than your mere imagination. And many of the examples that I will show now actually play around with the question of, is it actually a skill to be a prompt designer? Is prompt engineering actually something useful you should invest your time in order to compete? Because that's also what basically the 36-page long footnote that OpenAI released with this tool insinuated, basically saying people who have early access to these tools will have a substantial advantage in the race to become like the best prompt engineer. And in the beginning, only a selected group of early testers had access to the models, and these people were already posting images on Twitter, like the one on the left, that were super impressive, but you could never really tell how much the machine actually understood of the things that you read there. And so I think I wasn't the only one when I finally got access to type in entire poems, for example, testing out if the machine, naively, I thought, I was naive, not the machine, in thinking that the machine could actually understand something of a poem, because that was basically the image that you got when you looked at these early images without having access. Then, after I finally got access, I tried out or re-prompted many of the seeming prompts, apparent prompts that I saw before, and found out, well, actually, there was a lot of cherry picking going on, a lot of editing of what people published as the supposed prompt, and much more mixed results, actually. So the one on the lower right is what happens if you actually type in the prompt you see on the top left. Going on into along the lines of early images that left an impression on me. So there were a lot of combinations of famous cartoon characters, for example, placing them into famous movies, and wrapping my mind around that the machine was able to understand this was took me a while. And again, there's also an important point on the lower left, again regarding design skills, where it says that now it's not the skills of drawings anymore, but you need skill of database, of art history, of also how these models are constructed in order to produce good images. And in the beginning, there were a lot of restrictions on the types of images that you could do. There are still, but less so. In the beginning, you couldn't do faces on OpenAI because they were very worried about deepfakes. When these restrictions were lifted, it was another shock moment, as this emoji also indicates, how good these models actually were also in basically challenging photographers, because it was only advertised as these like annoyingly cute illustrations of animals and a very narrow bandwidth of potential images that these services were advertised with. And Danielle Baskin, a designer from California, she basically made the point that there are these two types of prompt designers living in you. The one is doing these like very elaborate technical speech, learning how to talk to the machine in order to create beauty, and then the other that just wants to have fun. And in this time where very few people had access, you probably remember this phase, there was suddenly DALL-E Mini, as it was called in the beginning, and here people could play around with much more freely, and it became clear that it's actually not so much about the quality of the individual image, but about the relationship between a funny prompt and a funny result, and having a comparison between what people write and what the machine produces, and also now people also experimenting with ugliness. And turns out that all kinds of monsters actually live in the latent space, not just David Hasselhoff devouring a hamburger, but also previously unknown creatures like the Krungus. People were typing basically random letters and finding out that the machine had a specific understanding of certain creatures that nobody knew about before. And there are many scary Krungus images. I only chose one of them, the original one, the person who tried it first. And so you have, on one hand, like a broad group of internet users just having a lot of fun with the free access, and then designers getting more and more worried. And there's this tweet that stuck with me by Hannes Bajor, also very early, 2 days after the release, where he said, funny how it's like that AI will replace graphic designers before truck drivers. And because there was always this talk about self-driving cars, and it was surprising, right, that suddenly the designers who were affected, who always thought, oh, we're doing something so emotional, so personal, how could a machine ever do this? But the clue is on the right in this little graph there, where the argument is basically made that if there's a lot of training data already available, which is the case for visual art, and if the results don't have to be so precise, if it's not a matter of life and death, if the machine makes a mistake, and you have a tolerance of, well, every fourth image is maybe okay, and you click generate again and again, and you're happy with the cherry picking, you could never do that in traffic with self-driving cars. So it turns out that the bar was much lower for artistic work, but also especially because of the training data, and I will come back to that. But so people get more and more worried, also worried about the future of the stock photo industry, which is now a big player in this whole debate. And but there was also the argument made that, oh my God, now this is getting serious. Now it's attacking the human creative side of jobs. And other people were annoyed by that argument, saying, okay, well, obviously you didn't care when manual labor was made obsolete. Why do you feel so special with your creative jobs that only now it becomes a problem? So don't be so arrogant about your skills. They are not so special after all. And then in the next phase, basically, something evolved where a divide started to show, where people tried to make the argument that this really is not art. AI art is not art. You were born into a world where most things were made by human consciousness. You may die in a world where nothing is made by human consciousness, an artless void. So really like this scary scenario. But on the other hand, you have people basically illustrating something that looks like a void, but pointing it out as, I'm 24 years old to the hour, and image synthesis, however you call it, changed my life. My access to this new form through notebooks as through betas has all been guaranteed by people. You live in my heart, all of you. So there's like a community of AI artists emerging who feel really fulfilled by this practice and by the possibilities and by the new tools to express themselves in a very emotional way as they perceive it, while others say, well, look, this is obviously not art. Please stop doing it, or at least stop calling it like that. And then there's also the question of how to best call this, right? And I actually quite like the argument to see these tools as image synthesizers, and there are many parallels to music synthesizers, but also important differences. I come back to that. But you see, there's some people trying to cool down this heated debate and say, hey, it's just a tool, while others really lean in on this polarization and saying, like, basically, these AI artists are these like sad people in front of their computers, in contrast to these people following the old tradition of humans using paint to express themselves. And this was all more or less circling around DALL-E in the beginning, but then in the summer, Stable Diffusion started to emerge. First only as rumors, then it actually got published. And the thing with Stable Diffusion is that it's an open source model that you can download on your computer, and it's just 4 gigabytes in size. And you don't need any internet access anymore, because for a while it looked like you will always have like this client situation, as now with ChatGPT talking to some server farm in California or so, and with strong regulations of what you can do. But with Stable Diffusion, suddenly the tool was for free. You could further train it and had much more possibilities to work with that. And while some people were scared by that, others argued that this is like the invention of fire. The invention of fire doesn't care about your feelings, basically. It's going to happen anyway, and you better adapt to it. And interestingly, by the way, Emad, the guy here, Emad Mostak, he's the founder of Stability AI. He is a former hedge fund manager who had the funds to create the infrastructure. And there was German researchers from the Ludwig Maximilian University in Munich who actually did the programming and developed the tool itself. And Timnit Gebru, who was the AI ethicist at Google once before she got kicked out, got really annoyed by Emad for acting like there hadn't been any debates about bias in data sets before. And this is a common thing. You see it with Meta and the metaverse right now with Facebook or Mark Zuckerberg. not at all considering all the ethical debates that had happened around Second Life and virtual worlds back then. So there's like a oblivion regarding the history of these digital media that happens again and again. And also the criticism around DALL-E got stronger, arguing that it's a scam because it took all the work from photographers, illustrators, and so on, especially concept artists who are also now another influential group in this fight about the future of AI image generation. And the occurrence of OpenAI, or of Stability AI in contrast to OpenAI, shifted the debate in regard to the question of, is it actually ethically responsible to release these tools? Because people could do deepfakes, people could do porn with them, they could do all kinds of harmful content potentially. That's why the big players in this field were so scared about releasing their tools. I mean, Google was quick in showing that they have a tool, Imagen is called, also apparently very powerful themselves, but they decided not to release it at all, not even to give people beta access or anything. And because they are scared of what people might do and how that might affect back on their brand. In contrast, Stability AI is going the other way and is saying everybody is responsible for their own tools, it should be treated like Photoshop. It's not our problem if people do harmful stuff with it. And over the last few months, now with the AI businesses getting so much traction, companies like Google are visibly getting a little bit nervous, feeling, now also with ChatGPT, feeling a little bit rushed by OpenAI to keep up in this race of publishing these tools. And I quite like this reference back to this 1984 advertising, highly problematic in itself, of the first Apple Macintosh, where the narrative is basically that you have like this young individual, creative female, basically, the individual with the tool tearing down the regulation by the strong old white men corporations, basically. And this is the role that OpenAI, that Stability AI also tries to make. On the right, it's a meme that basically makes fun of these common comparisons, oh, which model is better, and here the point is, of course, that in various types of topics, you don't get a result from OpenAI at all, or from DALL-E, because it's regulated. And then the debate starts to get hotter again, because now the realization starts to sink in that it's not so much about actually a machine automating on its own, having like this deep understanding that the machine is actually quite stupid, that it's just repeating patterns that it has learned from taking in billions of pictures, and many of them produced by professional artists. And these artists could actually find their own images in the training data, and they could also summon up their work by typing in their own names or typing in the names of other artists. And that's how Greg Rutkowski became famous. He's a concept artist for video games, and hitherto quite unknown. And he then turned into one of the most popular prompts among all, like bigger than Picasso, as a style modifier for people wanting to get more detail, more fantasy, more kitsch, more flames and dragons atmosphere into their images. And because the early adopters of these technologies are quite fond of these fantasy aesthetics, Greg Rutkowski became really big in this world, but he didn't like it at all. And is one of the people now arguing against these tools. And he, I think rightfully feels robbed, but then again, he also got super famous. I don't know how much harm it actually did to him, but I can totally understand that because he's so present in the training data and in the results that it must be a very strange experience if millions of people use you as a prompt and produce work like you. By the way, Midjourney, one of these tools, it's the biggest. They use it via Discord, and it's the biggest Discord server of all now. And it has now 10 million users, the Discord server. And if you switch it on now, there would be like roughly 700,000 people live now typing in prompts. So it got big quite quickly. And another aspect that I find very interesting in this is that people started to develop like a strong pride in developing their prompt skills and getting better in becoming AI artists and producing work like on the left that is less and less good to distinguish from like traditional photography or traditional painting, and the results are quite impressive. And so there's the side that tries to be very technical, and there's also a side that tries to be very imaginative. Like, for example, Merzmensch Cosmopol is an AI artist who's very accepting of this name and this role, who did an amazing series where he basically did like an urban exploration of his imaginary house, and you have him as a guide taking you into the cellar of this house and discovering more and more rooms, and it's like very much like a dream where you open a door and a new world opens up, and there's a lot of creativity in it, and understandably a lot of pride in the results. I can totally feel that, but then again, he's also getting aggressively attacked by people who say, well, this is not real art. Stop calling you artist. This is ridiculous. You're just telling a machine what to do. And so, as with everything on Twitter, eventually it turns to pure hate and people shouting at each other. And AI artists receiving messages like, "It's a shame you became a fake artist. I used to love your work when you were doing it yourself, but now you're doing everything with artificial intelligence. It's really not the same. There's no merit to it. I'm also very disappointed that you deleted the comments I put on your last post and also how you've tried to avoid my questions. You went from a real artist with a lot of talent to someone who doesn't do anything by yourself. And on top of that, you allow yourself to sell them. It's easy to tell an AI to make a mushroom house in a forest. You don't deserve anything that your subscribers gave you. There's no more work done." And it gets even more extreme. Like the one on the right makes basically the argument that this like arguably boring style of these like flat humans, it's a very overused style on the left, done by humans. This is like shitty art, but the argument is it's basically bad because it's about queers and bananas taped to the wall and so on, and how can that be beauty? So there's like a real hate against progressive art, and basically saying, look at these AI artists producing like real beauty. And beauty is again like a very loaded concept, of course. And the image that is shown here on the right, on the top right, it's one that won in a state art fair, like a tiny art contest in the category digital art, and then was revealed, oh my God, it was done by the machine. And I don't want to go into this boring discourse of, oh my God, did the machine did it on itself? Is the machine itself creative? I think that's bullshit, but still people use this argument. And then David Rudnick, one of the most influential graphic designers currently, he's one of the people really hating this whole development, saying, you wished you could be an artist, never developed the skills, now you have access to a tool that plagiarizes artists, you never commission an artist again, yet demand to be considered an artist, now a meaningless term. Culture fragments into 8 billion narcissist pieces. And somebody else says, okay, I'm taking a break from AI image generation. The toxicity of this discourse around the space has unexpectedly evolved faster than the actual modeling innovation itself, and I don't have the time or energy to deal with it. then we reach another phase where the big platforms have to somehow react to these developments. And one of the largest platforms where concept artists, digital artists, all kinds of artists uploaded their stuff over many, many years is DeviantArt. And then DeviantArt made this tweet basically sounding very positive in the beginning, saying, yeah, we are introducing new AI tools and controls, because their community was divided about it, saying, oh yeah, you have now control about AI art if you want to see it in your feed, and if it's generated by AI, and also you have the ability to opt out of prompts and out of, most importantly, your art being used for the data sets, which sounds like a great idea, only that people had thousands of images on this platform, or hundreds depending on the artist, but a lot of images, and this feature was designed in a way that you had to opt out every single image. You had to go to each and every image that you ever did and say, no, please don't use this for AI image generators as training data. And you see the ratio of this tweet. So it has 1,400 likes and 9,000 quote tweets, and all these quote tweets were like the DeviantArt community being very rageful about this new innovation. And from developments like this, a new movement started, the No AI art movement. And so basically on the left, you see ArtStation, another platform like DeviantArt, which also became famous because, like Greg Rutkowski, it became very helpful, as it turned out, to type trending on ArtStation to improve the quality of your image, because the model had somehow learned that what was trending on ArtStation delivered good results. And then the artists on ArtStation, who hated this old development, started to post a lot of no AI signs in order to ruin the future training data, and also to make a point of not being happy with this. And so what was trending on ArtStation now was this anti-AI art movement. But then you have the aggressive reaction again from the AI artists, who were basically making fun of the naivety of the people on ArtStation, posting how their AI image generated art was supposedly now destroyed by this development, and say, oh my God, my art turns out like this. Now these like aggressive signs turn up, and I can't work anymore. But this was a fake. People were just making fun of the thing on the left, but people were actually believing it. And so the anti-AI art community had to tell each other, no, it's a fake. It doesn't work like that. It's not so. The training data is from the past. It doesn't react within like a few days or a few hours. And these counter developments now formed into various lawsuits, for example, and also crowdfunding campaigns trying to collect money for lobbying. And so I think they have now collected $200,000 roughly with their campaign Support Human Artists. And a while ago, it got even more interesting, because now also Getty Images, as one of the biggest stakeholders in the market for images, is suing Stability AI. And I'm really curious of how their setup of media lawyers might look like, because there's really a lot of money involved. And there was a parallel crowdfunding campaign on Kickstarter by the other side in this conflict, by the AI artists, but a specific fraction of them, the people who arranged around the term unstable diffusion. It's also a Discord server, and unstable diffusion is basically the group of AI artists interested in creating porn with Stability AI, which is possible with that tool. And it's highly recommendable to have a look at the Unstable Diffusion Discord server. I decided not to show you too much of that, but it's a very, as with every other previous medium, porn is of course like a big attractor. And but this campaign got shut down by Kickstarter. After a look on time, I have to skip a few slides, but maybe just quickly, people more and more finding out how the training data is of course biased. It's not only suitable to create porn deliberately, but also by accident it creates porn. And Roland Meyer succinctly pointed out, we killed the future and turned the past into training data. And this is basically the result. And now we are at a point where the copyright infringement case got even more interesting because on the one hand, on the left, you have like the wisecracking guy making fun of people who think, oh, how can in 4 gigabyte of a program contain all these images? That's technically impossible, and that sounded like a very plausible argument. But now researchers are actually able to recreate the actual images that are in the training data from this tool. And so this copyright law case actually now got much more interesting because they really got proof of how the individual images are highly compressed in this latent space. And just quickly, in design, it becomes more and more relevant. We just finished our final shows in our semester, and many students are now working with these tools in various ways, experimenting. But it's very questionable how you actually can then transform these results into the real world. And it's also becoming questionable how useful these prompt skills are. So on the one hand, you get these more and more technical prompts with like also negative prompts as a new feature now, where people on unstable diffusion, for example, make sure I want a nude model with only 2 legs, please, and only 2 breasts and only 2 nipples and so on, and to make sure that the model doesn't produce like these mutated figures. And on the other hand, you have these models getting updated, and the prompt skills I learn that work 1 week might not work another week. And people now also use ChatGPT to create prompts for them. So if you can automate, and the results of that are very good. So if you can automate even the prompting, how useful it is as a skill. And yeah, so one user says that this scene has become like a massive joke, also because the prompts are very public and people steal prompts from each other. And I heard from students who worked on Midjourney that while they were prompting in, other users were stealing their prompts in live, basically. And as a last slide, to finish now, I want to turn your attention to an event we're going to do tonight at 8 in this room, a prompt battle, which is by the HTW Dresden, and it's our way to ask these questions in a playful way, and you can compete against each other, and we will find out who is the best prompt engineer, and would be great to see you again tonight for the battle. It's going to be great fun. Thank you.